Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining on this frigid evening. I bet you're all very happy that I didn't plan for an in-person CAC meeting today with a field trip outside. So thank God for that one. Um, but we have a pretty good agenda today. Most of us, I think all of us know each other. So I'm going to go ahead and skip introductions um, for now. And I think we'll just go ahead and jump into it. Typically, as we do this time of year, we put together a State of the Bay and we present it to all of our different boards and committees. So I'm going to let Carrie Flaherty-Wallia kind of take us take us deep into the State of the Bay, where she can talk about the health of Tampa Bay currently. So Carrie, oops.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Y'all see that?
I do.
Okay. The right screen.
I see the correct screen. It says 2024 State of the Bay.
Awesome. That's what I want. Oh, hold on. Okay.
Perfect.
So like Sheila mentioned, every year we update all of our various report cards that we have here at the Estuary Program that talk about different aspects of the Bay and the health of the Bay. So I'm going to go through some of those, and we've also got some new data analysis that is helpful for kind of understanding some of the trends that we've been seeing. So in case some of y'all haven't been in some of these previous discussions, I'm just going to do kind of a brief overview on what we look at as far as seagrass and pollution within the Bay. So this graphic is a really great representation of what happens when we get a lot of stormwater running into the Bay. We get a lot of nutrients that run off into the Bay as well. So if there's a lot of nutrients, as you see on the right-hand side of the graphic, we get a lot of phytoplankton blooms. You also have really low light availability. So that's a problem for seagrasses. Um, but as nutrients decrease, you can see that the epiphytes on the seagrasses, the phytoplankton decrease, and then you have this optimal level kind of right in the middle where you've got just enough light for seagrasses to be productive and just enough nutrients for them to be healthy. And then if you get all the way on the other side of the spectrum and don't have enough nutrients, then you don't have seagrasses either. You might have a lot of light, but if there's nothing for them to be able to bring in, then that's not a good thing either. So um, we look at seagrass as kind of the canary in the coal mine for the estuary. So we look at this very in depth every year. And some of the ways we do that is, we know that the total nitrogen that's going into the system, if we decrease that through measures such as reduced stormwater pollution, we'll get decreased algae in the system and also increased water clarity, which is going to make a really good, healthy environment for seagrass. And two of the things that we look for in our water quality report card, which I'll talk about later, is chlorophyll A, which is an indicator of the amount of algae in the water, and then light attenuation, which is a measure of the water clarity. And a combination of those two, if you have the right conditions, means that we have good conditions for seagrass growth and reproduction. So just to kind of reorient you to the Tampa Bay watershed, it's much bigger than just the estuary. So anything that's running off from this entire watershed is going to go into the bay. And for the sake of different ecological designations and different parts of the bay, we do have it separated into different bay segments. So I'm sorry this is so small, but the two upper bay segments are Old Tampa Bay. Over on this side, Hillsborough Bay. On the other side of the upper bay, middle bay, right in the middle, lower Tampa Bay, also Boca Ciega Bay and the Manatee River. So we look at those separately for water quality. And when we're doing these report cards, we take a lot of data, but we like to put it in a format that's a little easier for folks to kind of wrap their head around. So do these report cards based on stoplight colors. So for each one of those bay segments, we either designated a green color, which means, okay, we're doing fine. Keep continuing to do your projects, monitor everything annually, and then, just stay the course. If it's in the yellow, that means that the conditions are not ideal. So we want to begin looking into different management recommendations and also potentially put different research into play. And if it's in the red, we're really on alert and we need to implement some actions to get the bay's health back on track. So that report card, all these different colors, it has a lot of data behind it. So I'm going to go through what we've seen in the last year. So this is information on chlorophyll. And again, this is an indicator of how much algae is in the water column. And we have particular targets that we want to meet. So the blue line that's going across on all four of these graphs is the target that we want to stay below so that these environments are healthy for seagrass. And if you look on the x-axis going across, so that's the years going across. That very last dot is 2024. And you can see that in 3 of the 4 bay segments here, the chlorophyll is above that management target. So that means that the chlorophyll was a little more than we would like to see for this year. So that's an annual average, but you can actually look at that by where that's happening within the bay. And these are the 4 different bay segments: Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, Middle Tampa Bay, and Lower Tampa Bay. And you can see that there's red dots for a lot of those points within some of these bay segments. So Old Tampa Bay, Middle Tampa Bay, and Lower Hillsborough Bay have a lot of red dots. So that means we didn't meet the target in those areas. We can also look at it by month. And this comes into play especially because of the storms that we had going through the estuary over the past year. So these graphs are box plots. The white boxes and the error bars on top of them indicate the amount of chlorophyll, but it's basically a compilation of all the information that we have from 1975 through 2003. So that's what we normally see. The red dots are this year. So if you see a red dot that's above that average or median, that means that we've got really high chlorophyll levels. And if it's below, we're doing fine. And again, there's also a line there that shows, where there's a target that we want to meet. So if you look at pretty much all of the bay segments for the first part of the year, all of those red dots are below the averages. But once you get into the summertime, late summer, August, September, October, November, you start seeing those red dots going above the averages. Now, there's a normal increase in chlorophyll during the summer just because there's a lot of stormwater runoff coming out. There's a lot of sunlight. There's a lot of production. But in some of those months, you can see really high chlorophyll levels. That also intersects with when a lot of the storms went through last year. So Debbie, we had in August, September, we had Helene, and then October, we had Milton. So you can see that reflected in some of the chlorophyll values. So when you look at light attenuation, and again, that's the measure of water clarity, this is a similar graph. So you want to see us below that management target for all of the different bay segments. And what you see is that for the most part, we are below that light attenuation target for all bay segments, except for Lower Tampa Bay here in the lower right. You can see that it's above that target. And The light attenuation can be it can be influenced by a lot of factors, not just algae. So it could be the amount of suspended debris and um, uh, um, stormwater type runoff that's in the water. So when you think about a storm surge coming through, that could be potentially why we had some problems with light attenuation in lower Tampa Bay. So we can also look at this spatially as well. So again, but in space. So here you can see some of the stations that exceeded those targets in 2024. And you can see that most of the stations in lower Tampa Bay did exceed that target. And there's a lower kind of target for lower Tampa Bay because we expect it to be really clear because it's near the bottom of the bay. So when it exceeds that, it can be a problem. You can also look at this by month. And again, you see similar trends where you can see the red dots for 2024 getting higher in those months in which we had the storms come through, especially if you look at here over on Hillsborough Bay, you can see the dots above. You can also see it in lower Tampa Bay as well. So again, you're seeing that seasonal trend and also the effect of some of the storms coming through. So to put this all together for our report card, we take both of those water quality measurements to figure out if a bay segment's in trouble. And our overall results here, Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, and Middle Tampa Bay were fine as far as the management results, just because they didn't have an exceedance of that target in both of those water quality parameters. But lower Tampa Bay was high in chlorophyll A and was also high on that light penetration measure. So between the two of those, that became a yellow as far as our reporting. So if you look at that in the context of years past, this is the report card all the way back to 1975. And you can see that we are in the green for those 3 bay segments and in the yellow for lower Tampa Bay. But I do want you to keep in mind that for chlorophyll, we did exceed those targets in some of those other bay segments. So it's just because we didn't have both of them at once. So most of these segments are stay the course except for lower Tampa Bay. And you can get some more info on our website if you'd like to. There's also a 2-page report card that's available as well. The one thing I do want to point out too is that in Old Tampa Bay, we had these several years in a row that were in the yellow. And we don't necessarily think that Old Tampa Bay is out of the woods yet. We had 2 very dry years, and then we had this storm event. So the bay's been able to kind of absorb a lot of those nutrients because we had those dry years, and we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the next year. And then here's the report card that has the management report card and also the regulatory report card. And this one, has to do with actual regulatory requirements. So you can look more in depth on that if you like. So because we had all these storms come through and we were seeing that in the water quality data, we wanted to also look at the impact of sanitary sewer discharges or overflows during those storm events and over time to see if that might have been impacting water quality as well. So Marcus, our program scientist, took a deep dive into the Department of Environmental Protection Public Notice of Pollution database. Now, this isn't a perfect database. It's basically an estimate of the amount of gallons that have overflowed into the system. Usually it's actually into a storm drain or a pond. It's usually not raw sewage, and some of those gallons are recovered. So this is really just a way of showing that, okay, well, we have more of these overflows in certain times than others. The reports that go out indicate the location that these happened, the date, the contact, and a detailed narrative description. So it's not really a data set as we're used to interpreting it. This is basically what it looks like. So it'll have a story about what type of spill happened, the date, where it happened. It has, you know, the number of gallons, whether some of it was recovered, whether it was raw or partially treated. So, you know, again, there's a lot of caveats with this data, but this is kind of our first step at kind of assessing these over time. So the next slides I'll be showing you are some data from this exploratory analysis. This is a graph that shows sanitary sewer overflows from 2017 through the present. And as you can see, there's not a lot of action until we get to this past year. And, you know, we have close to between 80 and 90 million gallons that were reported. And a lot of that came from the Manatee River. These are parsed out by bay segments. And these are really high values. However, in 2016, 2015, we had very high values of sanitary sewer outflows. If you remember, back in Hurricane Hermine, St. Petersburg had a lot of these overflows, and the database actually didn't exist until 2017 after. So that's what we're dealing with. So back in 2016, that was 200 million gallons. So even though you can see this is a large amount for last year, in comparison to what it was in 2016, it's actually not that high. And you can actually look at this by month as well. And when you look at this by month, you can see again that these sanitary sewer overflows are only happening in those months where we had those storms pass through and a little bit afterwards. So again, here's August, September, October was Milton, and then it, you know, carries over into November. So there's a clear seasonal signal that's associated with the storms. So all of these different water quality parameters affect seagrass. So the next thing that we report on is seagrass results. And these are data from the transects that we coordinate as the estuary program with our partners. And if you look at these results, you can see that they're very similar to last year, but there are some species and bay segment differences. So it looks like there's an increase here in Haladuli, staying pretty even with some of the other species and staying even with total seagrass coverage. But if you separate that out into bay segments, you can see some differences. So here, when you look at it, you can see that there's some decreases happening in Old Tampa Bay. And then the rest of them are staying pretty consistent. So we're seeing those losses in Old Tampa Bay, some gains in others, and we don't actually have the aerial mapping from the Water Management District that we normally report on yet, but we've seen a sneak peek of the 2024 mapping results, and it looks like their mapping results do agree with this, with continued losses in Old Tampa Bay. So just to kind of take a look back at all the water quality and seagrass results. All the bay segments provisionally exceeded that chlorophyll management target except for Hillsborough Bay, and Lower Bay exceeded both. So they had exceedances in chlorophyll and also in light penetration, so that's why it's in the caution. And I mentioned before that we're coming off of a couple of dry years, so the bay was able to kind of absorb all that nitrogen and stormwater. So we're still a little concerned about Old Tampa Bay, though. There's continued seagrass loss. You know, we want to kind of figure out if this is an acceptable situation. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next year. So we need to continue to focus on these water quality outcomes and its effect on seagrass loss. All right, so.
Can I pop in really quick?
Yeah, sure.
So I also just want to say, and I wrote this in the chat, that all of those seagrass data that Carrie presented were all collected before Helene and Milton. So we did go out and conduct a few transects after the storms, and we noticed a pretty remarkable sediment movement and some pretty significant changes at some of the transects that were exposed to that strong storm surge. So please just keep that in mind. We won't know exactly the impact of the storms and the sediment movement until next summer. But for now, this is good signs. So we'll take the wins where we can get them.
Yeah, that's right. And also the mapping efforts that the Water Management District did, they also occurred before the storm. So we'll be getting those, but it may not be a representation of what's out there now. So we'll just have to keep that in mind when we get those numbers as well. So moving on from water quality, we also have other report cards that report on the health of different wildlife and habitats within the estuary. So I'll move on to the Nectin results. And Nectin is a word that encompasses swimming fish and invertebrates, and it's taken from Florida Fish and Wildlife's monthly sampling of fish within the estuary. And that data set goes all the way back to 1998, so another great data set that we can use. It's based loosely off of species richness, which is the number of species that are found annually and averaged over the year. So this particular report card will only be through 2023 because it takes longer to process those data than it does for the water quality data. Fish and invertebrates respond to water quality and habitat degradation, and we see that, over time. The 2023 results show that all bay segments are still in caution except for Old Tampa Bay, but I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So you can see that we've had some periods where we've been in the caution and then we've been in the green. And I think that it's better represented by the actual index. So this is the actual up and downs of that index over time. And you'll see that there are particular periods where you have these peaks and valleys. One of those valleys is within 2005 here. And if you all were around back in 2005, you'll know that there was a severe red tide event that happened during that year. So there was a lot of impacts associated with that within the fish communities. And it took a little while for them to recover over time. And then we had some good years here. And then when we moved into 2021, 2022, we also had another red tide event within the lower portions of the bay. So we saw some impacts from that. But we do see that there's starting to be kind of a small recovery here. And Old Tampa Bay's in the green, but I just want to point out that it is just in the green. I would almost say that it's probably still in the yellow because it's right on that line. So the fish communities are still recovering from those red tide events. And again, we don't know what they looked like in 2024. So it'll be interesting to see if this recovery continues through that year and what kind of impacts we see on the fish communities after the storms went through as well. Another metric that we look at is the benthic community. So those are the critters that live in the sediments. And this index reports on the health of those aquatic organisms that are near the bay bottom. And this index doesn't change as much because it's really associated with pollutants that have accumulated in the sediment over time. So a lot of this is legacy contaminants that are still there. And you can see that the upper bay segments, Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay, historically have the lower lower indices here. That's because they're up in the upper bay segments. They have a lot more of the runoff and legacy contaminants that are there. So the 2023 results, again, this is looking back a year prior because it takes longer to process all these organisms. And it looks similar to previous years, but Middle Tampa Bay looks fair now. So this is another thing that we really need to, take a look at. There's a lot of information in the background of this index, including levels of pollutants. And, if you want to check it out, you can go to the website and kind of explore on your own. So this is one where I feel like we need to do a little bit more work to see, why these communities are responding the way they are. And then finally, we have our habitat restoration outcomes for the past year. So this is a map of all of the habitat restoration projects that have happened from 1971 through 2024. And you can see they're widespread across the watershed. And the teal dots are the ones that happened just this past year. And we had 82 projects that happened within the watershed, and 14 different partners helped implement those projects, and a lot of you were volunteers on a lot of those projects. So thank you for that. So we're making some progress there. We can also look at the habitat types that we've been restoring over time. Starting in 2006, we started recording what habitat types were being restored. So you can see not only are the number of projects increasing over time, but the diversity of habitats that we're restoring are also a little bit different. I do want to point out that there are a couple of habitats that we had some increases this year. So oyster bars, this like bright pink color, we had an increase in the number of projects there, and also seagrasses, which is this orange color, we had an increase in projects there. By far, the amount of projects are usually associated with the upland habitats, but we do have a good cross-section of habitats that are being restored. So this is kind of our reporting on an annual basis that we report to the EPA, and based on actual habitat projects that are reported to us. We also look at changes in the land use land cover over time to see if we can see the changes in habitat through aerial mapping. So we have a report card for that that helps us keep track of our targets that we want to meet for our habitat master plan. So we have particular targets we want to meet by 2030. And we have the different habitats up across the top that we're targeting, and also the years going down each side. And the colors here represent whether our target for 2030 has been met or not right now, and whether if we continue on the track that we're on, whether we'll meet that target by 2030 is whether the arrows are going up or down. So you can see in some cases we have met targets. So for example, tidal flats, seagrasses, mangroves, oysters, those are all green. So that means that we've already met our 2030 target, which is great. And then some that we haven't met. So for example, our seagrasses, we're continuing to lose seagrasses. So they're in the red. And you can also see that the arrow is pointing down. So it looks like we won't meet that target that we want to meet by 2030. So this gives us kind of between the number of projects that people are doing on the ground and the land use land cover and how it's changing over time, we can give information and recommendations to our partners on what habitats they should focus on restoring in the next year. So for this year, we didn't change our recommendations from years prior. We wanted folks to prioritize seagrass, salt marsh, and freshwater wetland restoration. We wanted them to keep up oyster restoration and uplands restoration. We actually met our oyster target for 2030 this year, so that's a good win. And then as far as mangroves, they're doing fine, but that's for now they're doing fine. And a lot of that has to do with some expansion that's been happening because of the lack of of cold fronts that have happened. And so they've been kind of overtaking a lot of the salt marshes in the area. But if we continue to have sea level rise and development, you know, on both sides of those mangroves, they may not be doing fine in the future. So you can look up more information on this on our website. You know, all of these report cards and information that I've talked about are available, and a lot more information there if you want to play around with the data. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of them. Some of the data analysis was done by Marcus, so you know, I may have to, you know, ask him if you have very specific questions, but let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. As you guys can tell, we have a whole slew of different indicators that we use to assess the health of Tampa Bay. It seems like every day we're adding a new indicator. So thanks, Carrie, for just presenting on some of the big ones. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything for Carrie?
I have a quick question. Namaste, everybody. Happy New Year.
Namaste, Dr. Gordon.
Do we know or anticipate what impact the debris from the storms and the debris removal and the runoff, what impact that may have on the state of the Bay?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're already seeing some of those impacts, you know, with the increased chlorophyll concentrations and light attenuation, and you know, some of those targets that we didn't meet. So you're seeing some of that. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the other indices that are lagging year behind. So, you know, the fisheries index and the benthic index. So, you know, the best way to look at these individual events is to have these long-term data sets so that you're able to put it in context with what's happening over a large time frame.
Yeah, and from a community engagement perspective, I don't know that we'll ever really know the full extent of all the like physical debris, like the man-made debris and those impacts on the bay. But I can say that we've been working with partners all over the watershed to host these large-scale water-based cleanup events to at least try to get some of the debris that's washed into onto our shorelines, into our mangrove habitats and our seagrass beds to try and start pulling that stuff out. Because most of these habitats are pretty resilient. And if you can get this stuff out, then they'll rebound pretty quickly. So yeah, but I don't know that we'll ever have a full grasp of what all the impacts it was.
Yeah, and there have been some previous research that's been done on fish communities after hurricane events, and they're pretty resilient as well. So I'm really interested to see what happens next year in that in our index and see how they actually responded.
Thank you.
Oh, I just had a question about the Manatee River, and I was just wondering why they don't take data there, or do they consider Lower Tampa Bay to be indicating the health of the Manatee River also?
Are you talking in terms of the
all the data is divided into
sewer?
everything, Upper Tampa Bay, Lower Tampa Bay, old, whatever it is. But then you've got the river. And I was just wondering, do anybody ever think about taking some data points down there, or is that considered like this, the same as what Lower Tampa Bay would be indicating the health of the river?
There is separate information on the Manatee River. I didn't present that part of it, so I'd have to look into it as far as like the chlorophyll A and light attenuation target.
Yeah, I was just curious about it. I just wondered if data gathering is going on over there. You just didn't happen to have it on you.
Yeah, I'll have to look back on that and see what we actually have available.
Because they had all the stuff about the the sewage dumps, but that would be, I guess, from the county. But the rest of it, I was just curious about, especially because there's so much development going, down the river now. That's newer than what's happening around the old parts of the bay. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, we do have, like Carrie was saying, we do have kind of water quality that's collected in the different rivers. I don't know how far up into the river they go, so I think we'd have to check with our partners and to get clarification on that. But all of the water that goes through the Manatee River eventually does go into Lower Tampa Bay, so that our indices of Lower Tampa Bay can give us some idea of what's going on and the water that's flowing into it. But we'll do some digging on the Manatee River because those are all really good
No,
questions.
I'm not trying to give you any more work. I was just curious.
No, it's a good question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so now I'm curious.
Yeah, and as somebody who grew up on the Manatee River, I'm equally curious.
Carrie, I had a question. When you talked about the water quality in Old Tampa Bay, you used, we were wondering if it's an acceptable condition. So I wondered what you meant by that.
Yeah, so, with the report cards, we have that stoplight where, green is, stay the course, continue to do what you're doing. Yellow is, caution, maybe we want to rethink things and look at things a different way and incorporate some projects. So although water quality is looking good there, seagrasses are still declining. So there's that disconnect between those two reporting aspects. So we want to make sure that we're not forgetting about Old Tampa Bay and just, saying, okay, it's in the green, we don't have to worry about that anymore. We want to look at it across the board in all the different report cards that we have and make sure that, we're not missing something.
Thank you.
And I think it's also like a question put to the community of like, are we comfortable with the state of Old Tampa Bay right now? The past 3 aerial seagrass maps have had seagrass loss or have reported seagrass loss. We're expecting the next one to also have reported seagrass loss in Old Tampa Bay. So are we as a community okay with the condition of the bay that it's in right now? Or are we going to work together to try and come up with some solutions?
Have they finished with all the relief openings in Courtney Campbell Causeway?
That's a good point.
The only one that I'm aware of is the one that was completed a few years ago. I know that Ed and Maya have continued conversations with DOT to try and get other openings, but I am not entirely sure what the status is of those conversations. Carrie, I don't know if you're familiar.
I would have said the same thing you did.
Yeah. So I think we'd have to look into that. These are all really great points. So yeah, we can talk to Ed and Maya and maybe throw it in an update that I'll send out to you guys what the status of those are. Other questions for Carrie? I have a question for you, Carrie. And this is kind of looking into the future. You're a fisheries expert. So I'm wondering if we can expect to see another sort of decline in the Necton index as a result of these this pretty severe cold snap that we're in, or if it's not really cold enough for those species that the Necton index captures.
So the Nectin Index really looks at juveniles and small fish. And a lot of times they can, they're not as affected as the larger. Like
Mhm.
usually when there's a cold kill, you see a lot of big snook dying and, things like that. It also depends on the duration of the cold event. So, it's very cold right now, but if it doesn't last for an extended period of time, they're usually fine. So, I'm thinking back to 2010 when we had severe cold kills throughout the southern part of Florida. And, that not only was very cold, but it lasted for a very long time. So it really just depends on how long it lasts, whether we'll see an impact there. But typically, the Nectin Index is really good at picking up red tide events and not necessarily picking up some of those other types of events like cold events or, even hurricane impacts. But we'll see because we don't have 2024 yet. So
Awesome. Thank you. Are there any questions in the chat? Sorry, I have to find the chat.
doesn't look.
There aren't, Sheila.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was good to see everybody's faces this evening.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Appreciate it. Okie doke. All good things. So up next on the agenda, we have Dr. Blake Simmons, who's going to talk about the Tampa Bay Community Survey results. So Blake, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Sheila. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so some of you may have seen that we just published a report of the results from our Tampa Bay Community Survey. And I can't remember if I gave a previous presentation to the CAC when this project was kind of in development. But so I'll just give a little bit of a background on what the Tampa Bay Community Survey is and why it was created. And then I'll go over some of the key insights that we've gotten from the survey. So kind of as you saw from what Carrie presented, we have a lot of long-term data for looking at a lot of ecological indicators of the health of the bay. But we are currently missing a lot of long-term social data that is really important for helping us track various goals and actions that we have outlined in our comprehensive conservation and management plan for Tampa Bay. And so, especially thinking about the community-focused goals and actions that we have in our CCMP, so things like public education and involvement. We want to promote public involvement in bay restoration and protection. We want to promote public education about key issues that are affecting the bay. We want to provide for and manage recreational uses of the bay. All of those key indicators of a an engaged, informed, and responsible community are really important for us to monitor. And previously, we didn't really have any good metrics for doing that. So one of the big goals for creating the community survey was to establish some new indicators that we could track over time for evaluating some of those goals. But it also applies to a lot of different actions and things that, aren't necessarily considered social or community-based goals, but the community and our behaviors are nevertheless very important for influencing them. So even things like climate change, trying to improve the ability of our bay habitats to adapt to a changing climate. So thinking about green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, people's level of concern about climate change and their desire to act. Water quality, sediment quality. So one of the key ways that we can reduce nitrogen runoff from urban landscapes is reducing stormwater pollution. And there's a lot of stormwater behaviors that, we can try to track across the residents here in Tampa Bay. Again, green infrastructure also helps reduce nutrient pollution, stormwater pollution, those sorts of things. Other specific things, so reducing propeller scarring of seagrasses and also preserving the diversity and abundance of bay wildlife. So all of these different characteristics in our CCMP don't really have existing ways for us to measure progress towards those in the community. And so that's why we created the Tampa Bay Community Survey. We wanted to develop a long-term survey that can monitor social and cultural changes in Tampa Bay that'll help us understand how well we're achieving our CCMP goals. And so this is a survey that's designed to run every 2 years with a goal for every round of having 1,000 or more residents in the watershed that are included in the survey. This first wave of the community survey, the inaugural launch, was back in August. And here are some of the key things that are included in it. So getting back at public education about key bay issues, we wanted to actually test residents' knowledge of some of the key issues that we're interested in. So we looked at questions about their knowledge of recent water quality trends. What do they know about the key sources of nutrient pollution, some of the key stressors in the bay? So like what are things that are driving seagrass loss or nutrient pollution, as well as some best practices. So we have a question about the season in which you should avoid applying fertilizer to reduce the risk of nutrient pollution. We also have questions that gauge different attitudes, beliefs, and experiences of the environment that people have in the Bay, including some perspectives of environmental justice. So these capture kind of 3 different dimensions of justice, what we call distributive justice. So if they think that their area experiences more or less environmental challenges than other areas, procedural justice, which is about having a voice or a say in tackling environmental issues in their community, and what we call recognitional justice, which is a measure of if interventions that do happen in their community, if they think that those are actually reflective of the needs and the diverse values that are actually within the community. And other things that we have, so thinking about how they feel. So there's a lot of psychometrics, psychosocial characteristics of the community that we include here. All of these things in the literature have some, we believe have some influence on the environmental behaviors that people engage in. So this includes things like nature relatedness, place identity, solastalgia, hope pathways, as well as mental health and well-being. And I'll describe what all of these things are later in the survey. We also ask them about what they want. So we give them a list of different potential priorities for their community. And these can be priorities related to the environment, to social services, infrastructure, or the economy. And we allow them to rank what level, if it's a top priority or if it's a low priority for their community. And that'll really help us gauge what it is that the community wants, what are their needs. And so we can help design our interventions or our programs, our grants, all those sorts of things around what these communities actually really want. And of course, we want to know what it is that they do. So thinking about behavioral metrics. So activities that they engage in, specifically when they engage with nature. So these can be like active nature engagement activities, camping, hiking, swimming in the bay, bird watching, all those sorts of things. But it can also be passive nature engagement. So activities where nature isn't the focus, but it's the setting. So that's like exercising outdoors, reading or relaxing outdoors, having a picnic or a cookout. Those are really good entry points to engaging people with nature. We also have questions about their level of social engagement, so their involvement in different groups, one dimension of what we might call social capital, and of course, different pro-environmental behaviors that they have. And we have a suite of those that you'll see that we've included. So we had over 1,200 people included in this first round of the community survey. It includes 2 audiences that we've distinguished between folks. And so this includes over 1,000 people that were randomly sampled through the public, either through online or through direct mail based surveys. And we also have what we call our in-network audience. And so this is a smaller sample of residents, but these are people that took the survey either directly in response to an email from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, or they were forwarded on a link to the survey through one of our various connections. So this could be other NGOs that shared our survey, government agencies or departments, or even just friends. But in some way, these people have some kind of connection to the estuary program, whether direct or indirect. And we wanted to keep those folks separate because we imagine those people are probably more engaged with the environment. They're probably more active in different activities, especially volunteer events, and they may be more pro-environmental in their values and their behaviors. So we didn't want to mix them in with the public sample, which is really trying to be an unbiased pulse of the broader community at large. But we keep them in there because we're interested in comparing these two audiences. And so this is a map showing basically the hotspots of where our respondents come from. And so on the left, you can see all of the zip codes in the Tampa Bay region, and the darker zip codes are where we have more survey respondents coming from. So you can see that we have a pretty widespread representation throughout our watershed. We do have some clusters in St. Petersburg, as well as the coast of Hillsborough and Manatee counties. But we also have some pockets here in the center of Hillsborough, as well as the periphery of Hillsborough County in there. And also in this survey, we did give the participants the option to give us their nearest street intersection. So we had a little over 60% of people gave us a street intersection that we were able to manually verify to say that, yes, these street names exist, they are next to one another, and they are either in or close to the zip code that they provided to us. And so those are mapped here. And so you can sort of see a better distribution of the approximate area where each of these respondents are located in both of those two audiences. And this map is really helpful because now we can actually map the responses that people give us to actual neighborhoods in the area. So we can create some cool like geographic hotspot maps or cold spot maps and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities that the spatial data provides us. So first getting into the results that we have here. So thinking about what they know. So I'll go through all of the 5 questions that we asked them. I bet some of you that are in here probably took the Tampa Bay Community Survey. So hopefully you will see where you fit in and you'll see if you got some of these answers correct. But so we gave people 5 questions in the style of a multiple choice test. And so we gave them options, and in one question, they were allowed to select more than one option. But each question has a quote unquote correct answer to them. And so in this first question that we have here, this is a measure of their understanding of recent water quality trends. So in the last 5 years, water quality in Tampa Bay overall has declined, improved, or remained about the same. And these bars here show you the percent of the respondents that answered, that gave this particular answer. And these little diamonds here actually correspond to this axis, which shows you the average degree of confidence that they said that they had in their answer. So you can compare how confident people are who answered to this answer versus who answered to this answer, etc. And here in the blue square, we have the correct answer. And so this one we give people a lot of grace for because some of our staff also didn't get this question correct. So in the last 5 years, so since 2018, overall water quality in Tampa Bay has improved. Of course, there's been fluctuations throughout the last 5 years, but overall, when we look at the whole trend, we see improvements. But that's not the most popular answer. Most people, particularly those within our network, believe that it has declined. So over half of our in-network folks think that water quality has declined over the year, and then a decent amount also thinks it's remained about the same. So with this one, again, we give people grace. We're not too mad about this one. We don't expect people to really keep up with all of the changing messages about annual changes in water quality and things like that. But it helps to let us know that, really there is kind of this very grim outlook or this pessimistic outlook that the public as well as our in-network folks have. And so when we do see water quality improvements, it's important that we communicate that so that everyone knows that it's not all doom and gloom, that there is progress that's being made and there are good years that we have. The next question asks them, what nutrient is the biggest contributor to poor water quality in Tampa Bay? And hopefully most people in this room will know that the correct answer here is nitrogen. And most of our in-network respondents also answered nitrogen in here, and they were very confident in their answer, more confident than anyone else who gave any other answer. But unfortunately, nitrogen was not the most common answer for the public. It was instead phosphorus. And while we can't really say why that is, I believe it's probably linked to a lot of the publicity around Piney Point. Phosphorus was a big hot topic during Piney Point, and Piney Point is still a very salient issue to people, most average people when they think about water quality in the Bay. So this lets us know that, this is a key knowledge gap for us. We need to sort of get people away from thinking about phosphorus, and instead we want people to know about nitrogen and for that to really come to the top of the plate for them. We also asked them, what is the main source of nutrient pollution in Tampa Bay? The majority of our in-network audience correctly answered stormwater runoff. The public, this was the most popular answer for them as well. So that is a good sign, but it's not much higher than other popular answers like industrial discharges into the Bay or wastewater. So again, this is another knowledge gap that would be beneficial for us to fill, helping people get more confident in their knowledge of what stormwater runoff is and its level of contribution. I think it makes up 60% of nutrient pollution comes from stormwater runoff in our Bay, which is a very high amount. And we also asked them, to reduce the risk of nutrient pollution in the Bay, what time of year should someone avoid applying fertilizer to their lawn and garden? And this is a great example of some progress that we have made across the board. The majority of both the public and almost every single person in our network answered correctly that summer is the worst time to apply fertilizer to your lawn because of leaching, the risk of leaching from the rainy season. So this is really good. Obviously, there's still more progress we can make. This is only about 60% or so of the public. So we need to get the rest of these folks back on board with the rest of the messaging that's going out to the public. And then we had sort of a tricky question for folks. We asked them which of the following are major causes of seagrass loss in Tampa Bay, and you could select more than one. And so there are two correct answers to this: boat propeller blades and nutrient pollution. Here you can see what the most popular answers were. Nutrient pollution is the most popular answer by far, so that's really good. We're happy with that. But boat propeller blades were not a particularly popular answer. It was the least common answer in the public and one of the second least popular answer for our in-network audience. There is a lot of people that think that increased ocean temperature is one of the major causes. It is possible that increased ocean temperature does contribute to seagrass loss. We just don't really have the evidence base to really quantify that yet. So again, we're also going to give people grace for this question because it is possible that there may be things that we don't know yet about the degree to which ocean temperatures are affecting seagrass populations. But if we look at these two together and combine and say who got this answer completely right, it was very few people. They usually picked one or the other correct answer for this. And we also wanted to know where they get their sources of information about the state of the Bay. And this is really interesting when we compare between the public and our in-network audience, because what we see in the public is that they rely on very few sources of information. Most notably, the majority of them rely on television for their information about the state of the Bay. If it's not that, it's either social media or their own personal observations or word of mouth from friends, family, etc., stuff like that. The next biggest one is newspapers or magazines, but even that's just 25% of the public say that they utilize that for their knowledge. So everything else really isn't that popular, but the in-network audience has a much larger variety of sources of information. And very interesting, the in-network audience largely relies on their personal observations whenever they are getting information about the health of the Bay. Now, of course, you couldn't select more than one of this, so it's not saying that, every single person in the in-network audience is only going off what they see or what they feel or things like that. So it's just one of the things that contributes it. But you can see they have a greater diversity of places that they go, especially looking at government websites, NGO websites, mail or email letters, those sorts of things. Less so on television. But this is helpful because it lets us know sort of different communication channels for different audiences when it comes to sharing information about the state of the Bay. And so if we look overall at how this knowledge weighs out, here we have a graph kind of showing the distribution of knowledge scores for the public audience as well as the in-network audience. So you can see the public overall has a relatively low knowledge score, just a score of 1.1 out of 5. So we've assigned them a very sad letter grade of a D. The in-network audience is better, a 2.3, which we've graded as a C, about a C+. So that's pretty good. We're happy with that. We can do better with this. And so this will help us set goals for ourselves in terms of, getting more education out there. We want to see this knowledge score increase across the board, both in the public and our in-network audiences. And we also want people to be more confident. So you can see that the public is less confident on average in their answers than our in-network audience. And so we want people to feel more empowered, more confident in their knowledge that they have. Now, we asked them a lot of questions about what it is that they do, different activities that they engaged with. So here, the bars here, the question that we asked them was how often they engage in these different behaviors in the last 12 months. And so that ranges from never in the light blue to multiple times per week in the dark blue. And so these bars show you the percentage of respondents in the public and in-network audience that said that they do those behaviors at that frequency. And then we also have just an average frequency score. So from a scale of 0 to 4, with never being 0 and 4 being multiple times per week, just to kind of help guide your eye when you're trying to look for patterns across this much data. But basically here just kind of shows you, all of the different activities that people do and who does things more or less frequently. You can generally sort of see here, I'll show you these graphs as well. So these show you again the distribution of those frequency scores. So what we can see is that the in-network audience, probably not as big of a surprise, tend to engage in more active nature engagement activities. So these are particularly popular ones are wildlife viewing or bird watching, gardening, paddling, boating, those sorts of things, much more common in our in-network audience. But passive engagement is actually more common than active engagement, which might make sense for most of our public. Particularly exercising outdoors is very common, particularly in the in-network audience, but also for our public. And just kind of across the board, all of these different passive nature engagement activities are fairly common across the board. And so these are good entry points for maybe getting more people involved in nature, potentially converting more people to those active nature engagement activities. And then the public and the in-network audience are kind of the same when it comes to these nature-based attractions. So it's about places or sites of interest where nature is the focus. And so probably not surprising, everybody loves the beach. So the beach is the most popular attraction in the area. For our in-network audience, local, state, or national parks are also quite popular for them, probably not surprising as well. Some of the least popular ones are zoos or aquariums or outdoor playgrounds. And so we can use this information to help us understand when we have events or when we want to schedule activities, thinking about what is it that the public or our in-network audience would be more interested in doing versus where might we get fewer people to participate. We also asked them about different environmental behaviors. So the same type of setup here with the bars and the diamonds. We have sort of general behaviors. So these are things that pretty much anybody can do across the watershed. So this is simple stuff like recycling household products, choosing to walk, bike, or carpool instead of driving, planting or maintaining native or flora-friendly plants, or restoring natural habitats. So participating in cleanups, plantings, removing invasive species, those sorts of things. And so basically what we can see is that recycling is very common in both audiences, much more in our in-network audience compared to some of these other options that we have here. But really the most interesting thing here is specifically homeowner-related behaviors. So these are questions that are more like stormwater-related behaviors that are more applicable to people who have control over their properties and their landscapes. And so we have questions about how often they fertilize their lawn and garden, how often they water their lawn or garden, how often they blow grass clippings or leaves onto the street, and how often they maintained or installed a rain barrel, rain garden, or a swale on their property. And so just some key things that we can measure from this, again, thinking about indicators for the state of the Bay. So a third of the public says that in the last 12 months, they have blown grass clippings or leaves into the street. And so this is a pretty big deal. That's a relatively high number. In a lot of areas that is illegal. You can get a fine for doing that, and it is a big contributor to stormwater pollution. So that's not a great number, and hopefully we can, we want to see that number go down in future iterations. Over half of the public says that they have fertilized their lawn or garden in the last year, and almost half of our in-network respondents also said that they do that. Now, fertilizer in general, maybe not so great, but we'll give people, grace, and it's really just a matter of how responsible you are when it comes to fertilizing your lawn. So we asked a follow-up question. For those people that had fertilized their yard or garden in the last year, how many of them fertilized during the summer? And so almost a third of the public reported fertilizing during the summer, and a fourth of our in-network respondents that fertilized said they did it in the summer. And so again, that's also a little bit concerning. It's not super high, so that's good, but this is the worst time of year to do it. There's a lot of bans, and so we definitely want to see this number decrease over time. And what's even more concerning is that when we pair that with the knowledge question that I just showed you to see if they know when the worst time to fertilize their lawn or garden is, of these people, 50% of the public that fertilize in the summer know that it's the worst time to do it. And all except for one of our in-network respondents that fertilize in the summer also know that it's the worst time to do it. So this is a little bit concerning and presents a little bit of a challenge, when we say, hey, people are doing this behavior even though they know they shouldn't be doing it, right? So it raises the question of, what other tactics do we need to do to convince people not to fertilize during the summer months, even if they already know that they shouldn't be doing it? We also asked them about their priorities. So we gave them a bunch of different priorities that had to do with the environment, the economy, infrastructure, or social services. And so here you can see the distribution in terms of the level of priority that they assigned, where 0 is not a priority and 4 is a top priority for them. So when it comes to issues related to the environment, we do see that our in-network audience places greater priority for those issues. In fact, over half of our in-network audience ranked the environmental priorities as their #1 priority over all other topics, whereas just over a fourth of the public ranked environment the highest. And here's just the averages that you can compare between those two. And here are the explicit examples that we gave them for them to rank. I won't go through all of them. We do have a report out. You can read this and you can go through all of them if you want to go in more detail. But really the key thing here that we want to look at is where are there synergies? Where are there overlapping opportunities? And so if we look at the top 5 priorities from both of our audiences, we can see that a reduction in overall cost of living, improvements to flood protection infrastructure, and improvements to water quality in local rivers and ponds is a top priority for both the public and our in-network audiences. And so by identifying these areas of synergies and overlaps, we can better prioritize interventions and solutions, particularly nature-based solutions, to tackle these problems that are more ubiquitous. They are desired by the most diverse audiences that are out there. And so that's how we can use this information to really not only track how priorities change over time, but how we can help make decisions to meet the needs of our community. And so we asked them also a lot of questions about how they feel. So all of these psychometrics here have been shown in some way or another to influence environmental behaviors of people. And so I'll just go through and just show you an overview of how people have scored across the board in these 2 audiences for them. This first one up here, place identity. So place identity, it's a measure of one's emotional or symbolic attachment formed with Tampa Bay. It's an average based on 3 items. And this is important because we generally think that in order for a person to want to protect a place, they need to feel connected to that place or feel like that place is special to them. And so interestingly, we can see that the in-network audience has a greater sense of identity with Tampa Bay than the public, but the public isn't too bad. They're over the halfway mark. But there's still a considerable amount of the public as well as the in-network folks that really don't identify too well with Tampa Bay. Nature relatedness is a measure of one's subjective connectedness to the natural environment, so their sense of their connection to nature. And again, we see often in the literature that people that feel more connected to nature are more willing to protect it and to behave in more pro-environmentally responsible ways. And as we might expect, and another reason why we separated these 2 audiences, the in-network audience does feel much more connected to nature. Some people you can see almost maxed out on this score, but there's a much flatter curve for our public. So there's a lot of people that don't really feel very connected to nature. And some people have said that this connection to nature is actually one of the #1 priorities for well-being. So it's really important that we try to improve this number in the public and give them more opportunities to connect with nature. Solastalgia is a fancy word that basically is just a measure of emotional distress caused by environmental change or degradation in Tampa Bay based on a lot of items. And so it really reflects how concerned we are and how distressed we feel by the changes that we're seeing in a place that we are located in over time. And we generally see, probably unsurprisingly, solastalgia is higher in our in-network audience than in the public. But you can see that the distributions are a lot flatter. There's a lot more kind of diversity in this middle ground area. And so this one is rife for additional investigation to really understand how people differ. People with low solastalgia versus high solastalgia. What makes them different? Why is it that some people might experience more emotional distress over the changes they're seeing than other people? We also have 2 different dimensions of what we call hope pathways. So hope pathways is a measure of one's perceived capacity to achieve environmental goals in their community. And there's 2 different components to it. So there's this self-efficacy pathway, which reflects their hope based on their knowledge of what they can do to solve environmental problems. So people that score high on hope self-efficacy pathway really feel that they know what they can do to solve environmental problems, and that they feel like they are prepared. They are ready to take action. And what we see is a big difference between our in-network audience and the public. The in-network audience has a greater sense of hope in their own abilities and their knowledge of being able to tackle environmental issues, whereas the public has a lot less hope in their own knowledge or abilities to tackle these environmental issues. The same can't be said for response efficacy. So the response efficacy pathway reflects one's hope that the actions they take can have an impact. So regardless of if you know what you can do, this is a measure of saying, hey, if we can find something to do, I have hope that it will actually make a difference and that it will actually work. And this is great that there's actually very good alignment between the public and the in-network audience. And generally, they have hope that if we can find actions to take, that they will actually make a difference. If we saw a lot of folks over here, it would be very doom and gloom. It would be very, it doesn't matter what we do, nothing's going to work. And that's a very scary place to be in. So this is a very positive outcome. But of course, we'd love it to be higher in the future. And then the last little psychometric that we have here is a measure of environmental justice. And so if we just look at our audiences that we've been looking at here, this is a measure of one's perceptions of distributive, procedural, and recognitional equity in their community. And we don't see too many differences. We do see that the in-network audience has a lower sense of environmental justice in their community compared to the public. But we also wanted to know, so we have mapped out underserved communities in the Tampa Bay watershed. And with that spatial data that I mentioned earlier, we can identify which respondents are located or approximately located in one of those underserved communities. And although we do see that people in these underserved communities do generally have a lower sense of environmental justice in their community, they actually aren't that much different from people that are outside of underserved communities. And so there's a lot more that we would want to investigate here. But ultimately, we definitely want to get that environmental justice score higher across the board. And then one of the last things that I'm just going to highlight today is eco-anxiety. And so this is actually a relatively new diagnostic measure of anxiety specifically related to the environmental crisis. And so what this actually does, it measures affective symptoms of eco-anxiety. And it's the same scale that psychiatrists use to diagnose generalized anxiety disorder. And so we use this the same method across this audience, specifically related to their anxiety for environmental issues. Overall, we did find good signs that people scored very low on eco-anxiety. This is a very good score. We want to see most people at this corner, very low eco-anxiety. But when we classify people from these scores into actual diagnostic criteria for defining symptoms, again, we see most people have, low or non-existent eco-anxiety systems. That's great. That's fantastic. But what we actually see when we start looking at moderate to severe symptoms of eco-anxiety, 17% of the public exhibits moderate to severe symptoms of eco-anxiety, and that's more than twice the amount of people that are within our in-network. And that was initially surprising to me. I thought, the people in our network, they're more connected to nature, they have a higher degree of solastalgia, they're more concerned about environmental issues, they want environmental action. Surely they're going to have more eco-anxiety, right? But they don't. The public actually has more eco-anxiety. And this will be something that we'll need to test in the future. But I wonder if the reason is because of this hope here, this big difference in that our audience, our in-network audience, although they have a lot of concerns and they value the environment, they have a greater sense of hope than the public. And I wonder if that is the reason why moderate to severe eco-anxiety symptoms do not manifest as commonly as they do in the public, which has less hope in their knowledge of what it is that they can do to help the environment. So I have not been monitoring time. I could have been talking for an hour. I don't know, but I promise I'm at the end. So after all of this, basically, what is this to say that we do have recommendations going for future work. So especially, we have several research recommendations. So we really want to better understand the interactions between all of those psychosocial constructs that I mentioned before. So how does solastalgia interact with nature relatedness, with place identity, with hope? All of that stuff, none of that has been fully explored to the scale that's now possible in the community survey and back in the literature. So this is an area that we really want to better understand. As I mentioned, we want to better characterize eco-anxiety. Who is it that's suffering from eco-anxiety, and try to understand why it is they're suffering from eco-anxiety. Why is it that two people can be very similar across many different characteristics, but one person might experience the affective symptoms of eco-anxiety and the other person might not? There is no answer for this in the literature, so we can be one of the first people to investigate that. The role of experience also needs better understanding. So one thing that I didn't show in here was people's perceptions of changes in the environment. So negative experiences of rainfall, of temperature, fish and wildlife changes, those sorts of things. Those can all influence our attitudes, influence our beliefs, and ultimately influence our behaviors. And that leads us to our, kind of top recommendation for future research is better understanding what are the factors that predict environmental behavior so that we know what levers do we need to pull if we want to get people to start engaging in more environmentally friendly behaviors throughout our watershed. And then finally, we also have some practical recommendations based off of these results. So as I mentioned earlier, we know now where are some of the important knowledge gaps in the community. So nitrogen and stormwater runoff, those are our two big knowledge gaps that we have. And so we can focus our educational efforts on nitrogen and stormwater runoff communication. Also, as I mentioned, those big differences between the public and in-network in terms of what information they go to learn about the state of the Bay. So television and social media for the public, but you also have personal experiences, government and NGO websites for our in-network audiences if you want to reach them. We also want to build people's connection to nature. We have seen some entry points into engagement with nature. So those more passive engagement opportunities are more enticing to the public. And so if we want to help get people connected to nature, maybe offering more opportunities for people to exercise in a natural environment, or offering cookouts or picnics to the public. Those might be good ways to start getting people more connected to nature and to get them to start doing more environmentally friendly behaviors in the end. Also, when we think about those priorities that I showed you earlier, being able to identify synergies, those overlaps, and if you use the spatial data, you can actually map onto our region where it is that people want environmental topics addressed, where they want economic topics addressed, where they want infrastructure topic addressed, and how we can find complementary solutions to all those diverse needs that people have. And finally, all of this is to say that we can use this information as well as additional demographic, socioeconomic data that we've collected from the survey respondents to identify key target audiences, whether that's for volunteer activities, increasing nature engagement, or different social marketing or behavior change campaigns to try to change behaviors in particular populations. So with that, I'll end it there. We do have a very lengthy community survey report that is available, but we also have a very nice 2-page infographic summary that doesn't contain everything, but it does contain some of the big highlights from it. And I can put a link to that, or if somebody else wants to put a link into that, that'd be great. But yeah, that's it for me. I can't imagine how long I was talking, but I hope everyone's still awake, and thank you.
You were awesome on time, so don't worry. And I'm sure everyone is still awake because this is so interesting and so riveting. So does anybody have any questions for Blake?
I do. I thought that was really, really interesting. My only question, and I probably just missed it, was, did you ask people how long they've lived here?
Yes, I did not put it in here. That goes into our like sort of demographic type of questions. I can actually, what screen are you seeing right now, actually?
Thank you.
We see you're editing,
Yeah.
like your Google, slideshow.
Okay, let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing real quick, and then I'm gonna go into the report here. So I'm just gonna do you. Bam. Okay, hopefully you can see the report. So I'll just go to the demographics section. So yeah, so we have stats here in the report that actually show the percent of underserved communities that were included in here. We have gender, ages, race, and ethnicities. And so here is that that question that you asked, Robin. So let me see. Can I make you bigger? Yes. So we have a very small number of people that have lived here for less than a year or just for 1 to 4 years. It would be nice if that was a little bit bigger, just so that we could really sort of tease apart differences in perceptions of people that have lived here for a short time versus a long time. But you can see that the majority of the participants, this is on the left, that's the public, and on the right, that's our in-network audience. Most of them have lived here for 20 years or more. But yeah, and then we have other things like the type of residence they have, if they own their property. And then here's our socioeconomic characteristics. So their level of education, as you can see, the public here has a very smaller degree of education. So people that only have a high school diploma or a GED versus our in-network audience, which has a lot of doctoral degrees, master's degrees, and bachelor's degrees compared to the public sample. Household income, again, you can see a big difference between the public and the in-network. Employment, people employed part-time, full-time, etc. And then also a difference in political views. So our in-network audience was largely liberal to some degree, whereas it actually had an almost equal spread of political views amongst the public, but it leans slightly more conservative in the public. But yeah, and I think that's that's all the demographic and socioeconomic stuff we had. But yeah, great question.
That's really interesting that you got almost like an equal distribution politically.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it may also be though that I think a lot of the participants skew towards the more urban areas. So the downtowns, the sort of metropolis areas of our region. And so the more remote, the more rural areas of our watershed, I don't think have as much representation. And just generally speaking, those areas tend to lean more conservative. So I think, in reality, our watershed as a whole probably leans a more strongly conservative when we consider the rural areas. But in here, because we skewed a bit more towards the urban areas, I think that's what gives us an almost equal sort of representation across the board.
Other questions for Blake?
Like, I had a professor tell me I should switch to sociology in college because I was really happy in that class, and your presentation made me wish a little bit that I had. It was really good. I was surprised Robin asked about the demographics, how many of the participants had lived here for over 20 years, because your measure of nostalgia, measuring the change, environmental distress in relation to the change of the bay was so low in the public. And I wrote in my notes, I wonder if that's because older people would identify the feeling because they would have actually experienced the changes and younger people wouldn't. But that's not what your demographics show. So that was super surprising for me.
So yeah, you've exactly hit the nail on the head. So in theory, solastalgia should only, if solastalgia is strong in someone, they are more, it's more likely that they have lived in an area for a longer period of time because they have, you know, a bigger time scale to see change happen, right? If someone's only been here for 2 years, how much change could they actually see compared to someone who's lived here for 50 years, right? So that is exactly what we expected to see, and the fact that we don't see that is very interesting, and that's why we need to explore all of this further. You know, these results are just very high level. If we go down and get into the nitty-gritty, it'll be really interesting to see those people that have only lived here for a short amount of time. Do they still experience emotional distress from the changes that they do see? And, you know, do the people who have lived here for 20 years or more, do they actually experience more distress about those changes than the other? So it kind of, you know, calls into question things that we thought we might have known about this psychological construct. I'm glad you picked up on that.
We have time for maybe one other question, and then we're going to have to move on to Jessica.
I was looking for it in the report, and you may have mentioned this, but what are some of the actual symptoms of eco-anxiety?
Sure. Let me see. I'll go down into the very bottom here. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. Don't get scared off by this 106 pages. The majority of that is just like a little, what we call a data dictionary. And so it's very technical. It's for if you want to download the data or use the data, it has a bunch of, all of the variables are described in there. But so here we go. This section is where we talk about the eco-anxiety scale. So it is directly taken from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used in psychiatry and psychology for, you probably can't say diagnosing mental illnesses, but for characterizing potential mental illnesses. And so the way that the generalized anxiety disorder scale works is that usually you ask, over the last 2 weeks, hopefully you can see this. Over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following problems? And then you give a list. Here, for eco-anxiety, we amend this to specifically say, how often have you been bothered by the following problems when thinking about changes to the environment, including environmental degradation, species extinction, pollution, rising temperatures, increased flooding, those sorts of things. And then we give them this list and we ask them, you know, on a 4-point scale from not at all to nearly every day. So it includes things like feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, not being able to stop or control worrying, worrying too much, trouble relaxing, being so restless that it's hard to sit still, becoming easily annoyed or irritable, or feeling afraid. So we call these affective symptoms of anxiety in the generalized sense, but affective symptoms of eco-anxiety in this sense, because these are manifestations, right? So you may still be concerned about it, or you may still, you know, have some anxious thoughts in your head, but this is about how it manifests. So you actually have trouble relaxing, you're restless, you're annoyed or irritable, you're afraid. So it's actually how those thoughts translate into physical symptoms and manifestations. But yeah.
Thanks, Blake.
No problem.
Hey, well, thank you so much. Moving on to Jessica. She's going to present the Manatee Awareness Coalition Outreach Committee's update. Is
Yeah,
that correct? Cool.
thing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. If you know what the MAC is, will you put like a plus in the chat or a thumbs up or whatever you want to do? Harley knows what it is. That's cool. Okay. No, man. Like, I didn't say no. I said if you do know what it is, put a plus. Okay.
Representation matters, Jessica. I need
If you don't know what it is, put // Flashlight. Okay, at least one. All right. So let me pull this guy up. You can see two fat manatees.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so the Manatee Awareness Coalition is actually a subcommittee of y'all, of the CAC. The MAC, as I will call it, is just an ad hoc committee, so it meets as needed, which lately has only been like once or twice a year. They were super active more than 5 years ago at this point, and we're super engaged in getting manatee slowdown zones put in place in Tampa Bay. So that is sort of what they're known for most recently, but we were formed in the 90s. The main two things that the MAC does is promote science-based manatee protection efforts in Tampa Bay, like those slowdown zones that I mentioned, and create innovative educational programs. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today. We are supposed to be made up of government officials, utility companies, scientists, special interest representatives, and good old-fashioned residents and visitors. We don't have really every niche represented, so I'm not going to really talk about that today, but if you know someone who is a private industry or boating interest or angler interest representative of some sort that may have interest in manatees, let me know. We could certainly use more voices on the MAC. So it's been a while now, but I think we came to the CAC and talked about doing some sort of manatee education program or project with the MAC. How that has evolved over the last year is the MAC formed a really small working group of just about 5 people who were very interested, and we've been meeting at least monthly over the last year to talk about this community engagement project. We decided that because, as you saw, we are science-based manatee protection efforts, innovative educational programs, that we wanted to come up with some sort of educational engagement program related to manatees that really is science-driven. So that is taking the shape of phase 1 being surveys, which I'll talk about in just a second, and then moving on to evaluating those surveys, deciding what sort of outreach, what sort of engagement works to help people learn about manatees, learn what is good for them, what's bad for them, what behaviors can be changed, and all that sort of stuff. The two sort of target audiences are Tampa Bay coastal residents, and by coastal we mean quite literally on the water or live directly within walking access of the water. And secondarily, sort of not our main priority right now, are also recreational boaters. So that's something we're also going to be targeting eventually. Right now, we are finalizing logistics in the survey design. The survey is going to be carried out by basically 1 or 2 interns hired by the National Wildlife Federation, which is one of the representatives in that small working group. They're going to hire a couple interns that are both part-time. I'm actually going to share the information on the internship with you in a second because they're still hiring, and I'm hoping you can share that information with people. That intern will carry out the surveys. Those surveys will begin sometime in March probably and carry on for the next 3 or 4 months. Once we finish that phase of initial surveys being carried out, we're going to use that to apply for funding to do some analysis of the survey results, to expand or iterate or change, edit the surveys as needed. And then decide what kind of education, what kind of engagement, what kind of tactic really works to help people do better, to change their behavior. And when I say change their behavior, we're talking about fertilizer, like Blake was talking about. We're talking about lateral lines and their septic system, that sort of thing. We're talking about, do they have a living shoreline? If their property contains a seawall or contains access to the water, do they have a living shoreline or do they have a seawall? Are they open to living shorelines, that sort of thing? And then eventually, if we're going to talk about boaters, we're going to talk about propeller scarring from motor boats going through seagrass meadows. So there's a host of behaviors that are being targeted with this initial survey to sort of see what we want to do when we could actually get some funding. So that's where we are right now. We are still finalizing logistics. We're still finalizing that survey design. And the next step that we're going through right now is seeking applicants for the internship. It is a paid internship. They are looking for a recent graduate or someone who has at least 2 years of school behind them, so a junior-ish person. It is about a half-time work week, so about 19 hours a week. And they need to be somebody who's cool talking to strangers because they're going to be doing a lot of surveys. So an agoraphobic person, probably not the best intern for this, but potentially. Manatees and sea turtles are the two target species for this internship. With manatees, this survey project is the main thing that they'll be doing. And with sea turtles, they being National Wildlife Federation, want some help talking to local city councils and county commissioners about lighting ordinances that impact sea turtles and sea turtle nesting. So that's in a nutshell. I think that's all I have for you. I will share the link for this internship in the chat in just a moment. And I think that's all I have to tell you. So what do y'all think about this idea that we're working on?
That sounds exciting. I hope you get a good intern to do all that work. But manatees are a good, you know, charismatic megafauna, so it shouldn't be hard to get people to talk to you.
Yeah, I think the hope is that we don't let people know that we are talking to them about manatees. Like, we just want to learn from them what behaviors they currently have, where they're interested in, how they're interested in changing, and then learn like what works for communicating stuff with them. So we don't really want them to know that we're the MEC. We don't really want them to know that we're an environmental group, but I'm sure they'll figure out some of that from the questions. But yeah, but hopefully that does attract interns.
Like guerrilla surveying.
Right, yeah. I've had a lot of fun coming up with the Blake, what are they called? Like distraction questions or something like that. Just throwing out some random stuff.
Dummy questions, decoy questions. Yeah.
Decoy questions. There you
Decoy.
But we do, this is open. Here's the link. They did not put a close date on this because they basically want to keep this open until they find the right person, because this is such a sort of specific internship of talking to people, going out and being sort of self-motivated. So definitely share this with any students or recent graduates that you know, or anyone who regularly talks to those kinds of people. I would love to have some really good applicants for this position, and I think they're actually gonna end up hiring 2 at some point. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. So at this point in the agenda, we're at the CAC updates and upcoming opportunities. So I'll kind of kick us off. If you haven't already, please contribute to the CAC hours reporting form. So basically every quarter we highlight all the amazing work that our CAC does, and we provide a list of all the different events that we've done over the past quarter, as well as how many hours you guys have contributed of your time to the estuary program. So if you haven't already, please add your hours in. I have to give Maya a final number like today or tomorrow. So please get those in there as soon as you can. Also wanted to let you know that we are having a TBEP committees give-a-day. So it's similar to last year. This will be this Friday, so it might be a little bit chilly. But it'll be an opportunity to get to hang out with some of the other people on our management conference. So we'll be building those oyster volcanoes that, like we did last time. We'll meet out at Felipe Park. And Safety Harbor, we will provide food. I think right now it's going to be like a giant pizza. So nice and warm and cozy when you're done getting all muddy or not muddy, but all covered in cement. So please come out for that. Last year, the CAC had a ton of people there and basically won the competition between the CAC and the TAC. This year, there's way more TAC members that are registered. So I'd like to see some more of you guys come out so that we can kind of beat the TAC again. Does anybody else have upcoming opportunities or updates or things that they want to share with the group?
I'll share, this is the last day to register for Hackathon until I close it tomorrow morning. We do have a group of just individuals, so you can register as just an individual and it will be totally fine. We have a group to add you to. They are possibly going to be working on marine mammals. So if you know anything about marine mammals or coding or really any kind of specialty that has to do with the environment in Tampa Bay. You do not have to know how to code to do this. Go ahead and register. And I will wait for you to close it.
Will you share the link?
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the chat.
No,
Others?
if data science, if I can do data science without loving data, people can do manatee, marine mammals without loving marine mammals.
And the marine mammals isn't 100% what it's going to be. So you do not have to like marine mammals.
Go ahead, Jan. You want to showcase something?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you guys, I just read this book and it's very good. It is a history of the Tampa Bay estuary from the beginning of recorded history up until about the time the Tampa Bay Estuary Program was created. And it talks about how completely screwed up the bay got. And about the people that got legislation passed, like Fig and Grizzle, and it catalogs the dredge and fill, the development of the port, and the factors that caused the bay to be so polluted in the 1970s. And then it talks about the various the fact that it is being cleaned up. It focuses less on the good news than how it got that way, but it's really helpful to know the history and where the problem areas are still today, talking about Hillsborough Bay and sediments and Old Tampa Bay and the effect of the bridges on the bay, the effect of the dredge and fill on the bay, the effect of population growth on the bay. It was just extremely interesting. And I think anybody who's on the CAC would really enjoy reading it. It just came out the end of last year, so it's a relatively new book.
Can you repeat the name and the author?
It is Tampa Bay, The Story of an Estuary and Its People by Evan Bennett. And I put a link in the chat to the University of Press of Florida's website.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So they're the ones that publish it. You can also get it on Amazon, obviously, and other places.
So should we start a Tibet book club? I've
There
always
you
wanted to be
go.
part of a book club.
If we're going to start one, it would be a good place to start.
We can do it outside. Blake said we need passive
gosh,
environmental
yes.
opportunities.
Can we wait
so-
until it gets warmer?
Yes, please.
Jan,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that fasciculata in your yard behind you there, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Where is
I-
that? No, it is not. I have one in my yard, but that's not it.
All right.
I think this was at, where is that? It's at one of the local parks and preserves, but I couldn't even tell you which one.
That's
But-
all right. I was just curious.
No, but I do have one that a friend gifted me last May that was
Oh.
in her yard. It hasn't bloomed yet. And I
Mhm.
also have Tillandsia simulans, which is one you don't hear about very much, but
Mhm.
I bought it as a little
Right.
one and
Oh.
it's gotten quite big and is very happy hanging in my tree.
Very nice. Congratulations. Just keep me out of your backyard there so I don't add it to my collection.
Any other updates or announcements for the good of the group?
Yes, I have an update and an announcement, everyone, which I'm really excited about. So many of you all knew me as the Director of Service Learning at Eckerd College, but unfortunately, I was laid off in July and the Office of Service Learning was dismantled. So that's
Oh,
Eckerd
no.
College. However, I now have a new position as the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at the Evra Health Institute. And this is a brand new arm of Evra Health. I don't know if you've heard of Evra Health, but they are a community health center. They have community health centers all over Pinellas County. It's fantastic. We're going to be offering medical education within the community, credentialed, very fantastic. And we have a brand new building off of Olmerton, which I'm going to be inviting you, Sheila, and others to our ribbon cutting. So it's going to be fantastic. So Eckerd has now moved into the past, and I am still moving into the future, being heavily involved in community engagement. So Stephanie and friends, don't go nowhere because I'm going to be tapping into you all for sure.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Porter.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I also just have to say, it's such an honor for me to be able to continue to serve on this committee and to continue to work with you all in this capacity. That's the most thing I was frightened about when the changes came over the summer. So I'm so happy to be working with you all. I now have more space. So I definitely want to be involved with you all on a different level. I can't make it on Friday to the giveaway, but you're going to see me quite a bit more. I'm very excited about this.
Well, we're happy you could stay.
Thank
Sheila,
you.
I have a quick announcement and I apologize. I've got sick kids screaming. I ran away from them, so we'll see. Keeping Else Beautiful has a few things happening here soon. We have our volunteer luncheon, which is showing appreciation to all the wonderful things that were accomplished in 2024 on February 19th. And this year it's going to be at the Coliseum in St. Petersburg. So if you're not registered, we're going big. It's our first year at a new venue. We have a ton to celebrate, especially with all the craziness of last year. So I hope you'll join. I am not able to add the link into the chat right now because I'm on my phone. But if you go to our website, kppcares.org, it's in our upcoming events. You'll find it everywhere. In addition to that, we're kicking off the GAC on, February 28th with our Leaders Against Litter cleanup. And this year it's going to be showcasing our BBOT. I don't know if anyone's familiar with our BBOT or was at one of the cleanups a few years ago, but it's this really large trash cleaning robot that goes on the beach and cleans up like subsurface trash. Pretty cool, very slow, large Roomba, effectively. But it's going to be an exciting first cleanup for our Great American Cleanup series that takes place between March and June. Also a great time to just do a cleanup with us or a planting or an invasive removal. So more information on that on our website and on our social media, but I hope to see some familiar faces at our luncheon and at some of those cleanups that are coming up. So lots of fun things happening.
Thanks, Stephanie.
And Stephanie, I put those in our newsletter, so they will go out at the beginning of the month.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Anybody else have anything to add for the good of the group? Harry, do you have something to add? You popped up for me. Okie doke. Well, with that, thanks everybody for listening to all of the stuff we have going at the estuary program, and thanks for all of your engagement and your continued support of the estuary program. We couldn't do what we do without your support. And I hope to see you on Friday or at our macroalgae art project or art workshop on Saturday, or at the hackathon on Monday. So hopefully we'll see you sometime in the next couple weeks. And with that, have a great evening. Don't turn into a popsicle.